Last, but certainly not least, we're going to talk about the Cav civs. Germany was actually the first civ I used, and the Cav attack's but the troop training speed and action point recovery was awesome as a growing player, so it's definitely something you should consider using, and the Teutonic Knight stats are actually pretty decent. Spain is just kind of bad. The defense is good, but overall the Conquistador stats are pretty rough. And then the other buffs of resource production and experience gain just really fall off in the later game. Byzantium is actually a really solid option. I think it's not talked about enough. The Cav health is nice, and the hospital capacity is really useful, especially if you do a lot of field fighting or a lot of garrisoning, because you'll put a lot of troops in the hospital. But the stats just aren't that great. And Arabia is awesome. It's probably the most used one because of the rally damage, and if you are a rally leader and a Cav player, you pretty much have to run Arabia. Alright, so now we're on to the archers. I'm not as well versed with the archers, but I also know that certain ones are better than others. So, Britain's good, it's got some training speed, it's decent. It's great when you're growing because the training speed always helps, but a lot of it tends to fall short after that. Next you have China, troop defense, AP recovery, which is nice, and building speed, which is nice when you're developing. So it's good when you're developing, but kind of falls short after. Korea, similarly, archer defense, you have hospital capacity and research speed. Hospital capacity is very useful, and research speed is useful early on. And lastly, you have the Ottoman Empire, which gives you archer health, which is really nice, troop march speed, and active skill damage. So overall, the Ottoman Empire is probably the best for overall damage, and then when you're developing, Korea and China are also very useful for you. So as an infantry player, you have 4 troop civilizations to choose from. You've got Rome, France, the Vikings, and Japan. And each one has their own bonuses. Japan is great for gathering and gives you some troop attack, which is not amazing, and a little bit of scout march speed. So if you're wanting to get the fog exploration done just a little bit faster, Japan's pretty great for you, but otherwise I'm not blown away. It's great for farming cities though. The Vikings are great with counterattack damage, and they actually make them a little more anti-swarm that way. So they're also a very valuable option. France is probably my personal favorite, with the troop health and then the hospital healing speed increase. You're always healing troops in KvK when you're fighting, so it's always useful. And Rome is also a good option with the defense and march speed. March speed is something that's really underrated, so Rome and France are probably my 2 favorite, with Vikings in 3rd. So one of the most not talked about subjects in Rise of Kingdoms is what civilization to use your farm account for. The most popular tends to be gathering civilizations that give buffs to gathering, like Japan, or France, or Rome. But there are also some other types you can use. If you're looking to develop quickly and eventually make it a full-on combat account, using somebody like Egypt or China or Korea for the buffs is nice. Alternatively, if you're just looking for more troops, I really think that Germany and Britain make great options because they give troop training speed, and that 5% training speed doesn't seem like much, but for a small account that's not constantly spending or constantly being worked on to gain speed ups and to gain all that leverage, that extra 5% is pretty nice. And that gives you more troops to sacrifice in KvK to help yourself and to help your alliance and your kingdom and your camp. So consider using something other than Japan if you want to assist in a different ways of farm. The expedition shop is one of the insanely important things you have early on. It becomes kind of non-existent later in the game. But here are some tips, no matter where you're at, to make the most of your completed expedition shop or just out of what you have. First, always collect your daily rewards in Aethelheads. Even if she's maxed, you can always sell these later on for credits in your alliance store, and you can use them on other items like speed ups or VIP points, which you'll always need, so it's worth the time. Second, if you have a bunch of spare credits, buy everything that isn't a commander head from the shop, and you can then use the free refresh as well to get more items. You can always convert all these items, either using them as resources or converting them into credits in the Alliance shop if you don't need them. Lastly, when KvK rolls around, buy as many epic commander heads at the top as possible and convert them into your Crusader Fortress to help complete it faster. Your Alliance will thank you, and your kingdom will thank you. The traveling trader that shows up in your courier station is one of the most regular events in Rise of Kingdoms. But what should you buy and when? Today, we'll cover this. In general, the best items you can buy from traders are most things you can buy without gems. The reality is most of the gem items are much worse value than the VIP shop equivalents, so you're oftentimes just better off buying the VIP shop items with gems. But the items you can buy with resources are unique in the sense that the resources are easy to get, so even if you spend 1,000,000 food buying speed ups, you get a really great value that you can farm back in just a few hours. Second, although not a purchase tip in itself, use the free refresh, as it doubles your items to buy essentially. Past that, refresh at your discretion, as the cost is 100 gems and only increases, and the value for most items is not worth the VIP shop unless you can get a lucky roll and get them with resources. Lastly, try to catch the regular timer intervals. The courier visits consistently at the same time, even if you don't do anything to trigger it, including reset in 12 UTC, so keep an eye on the pattern and try to be online during that 2-hour window. This is the VIP shop. The VIP shop gives you so many great value items, and the higher your VIP level gets, the more options you have. But what should you buy? In this episode, we're going to cover just that. First, anything you buy with resources is generally good value, since resources are theoretically infinite over time. The AP bottles, speed ups, and equipment materials are the most important things you should be buying every week, though, no matter what level you're at, because you'll always need more equipment, you'll always need more speed ups, and you'll always need more AP. If you want to buy the Starlight Sculptures to level up commanders, or to convert them into alliance credits, you could also buy those too. For gem items, the gold heads are really not a great value, and you really shouldn't be using them unless you're trying to get a couple gold heads to expertise a commander before a big fight. However, the 8-hour speed ups, the purple materials chests, and if you can get high enough to get the 24-hour speed ups, are all really good solid values. So you can always consider buying those, especially during more than gems. So you just started playing Olympia? Here's a quick breakdown of the shop and what you should buy. Overall, the shop is pretty solid, although some items are locked behind ranks. You still have solid options at all levels. While speed ups are always nice, I always try to buy the AP potions first every time. After that, I go for the speed ups, and then lastly the resources. After that, then I go for the keys and the miscellaneous materials chests. I don't really think these are good value because they cost a lot for something where you can't even guarantee the material type. Honestly, once you reach a higher level, the selection material chest and the gold heads are also good values, and the ring's only really useful if you're planning on pursuing a full barbarian march. But these equipment material choice chests and legendary sculptures are also good if you can manage to get the points to get them. With armaments has come armament recycling, and one of the things you could do is use it in this shop to buy items. But which items should you focus on first? With this shop being pretty limited, it's a pretty clear-cut thing for me. The Sage's Testimony is always your priority. Just like with dispatches, you need to get Sage's Testimony as quickly as possible, because the quicker you get them, the faster you level. The faster you level, the quicker you're getting more dispatches and travels, which more dispatches and travels is the only way to guarantee yourself to have better chances, because you're getting more uses. Once you expend those, I actually early on prefer the blue chests, because you can get 4 times as many. So in the early game, before you have all purples and above, the blue chests are better value because you get 4 chances to get a good armament instead of 1 chance to maybe get a great one. So on average, you're going to do more impact with these blue ones until you get all purples. And then at that point, you're going to want to switch to all purples and above. But don't sleep on those early on. Here's a Lost Canyon shop breakdown. There's so many options that are good and so many that are less so that I want to go more or less item by item here. First, the iconic crystals and the Call of the Loyal, I think you should be buying unless you've got both your legendaries all complete and iconic, and you have like 2 or 3 of these flags built, because they're both just so useful that there's really no reason not to buy them, and you can only buy in limited quantities, so you're going to want to buy them every single time you can. I like Shio's Return and Eternal Night for infantry commanders, so if you've got spare coins and you just need a handful of the blueprint pieces to get them, or even if you're just at the end of the season and you want a bridge, those are both great investments. The Capitoline Wolf is just, it's aesthetic, it's nice, but it's all entirely up to you. I'm not big on the equipment pieces or the XP tomes because they're just accessible everywhere else, so why invest these hard to get coins in those? And same for the Starlight Sculptures. This is the Mightiest Governor. The Mightiest Governor is an event that every 2 weeks where governors compete for replacements to unlock commander sculptures for a specific commander. And this can also often become the most expensive event in Rise of Kingdoms. This event is broken down into 6 phases: training, barbarian hunting, gathering, power upgrade, fighting, and final sprint, which is a combination of all of them. These events are based on how well you do those things. When it comes to most open Mightiest Governor events, the vast majority of points will be scored in the training, fighting, and final sprint stages, especially competitive ones. Sometimes these stages can see scores in hundreds of millions of points, and it often prices free-to-play players out of even sniffing a top 15 placement. If you're looking for a little score boost though, consider planning in advance. This competition cycles regularly, so just plan ahead for whatever event you're looking for, and just have extra troop training or save a research to try to get yourself some extra points. However, this is not guaranteed, so try to see and feel out how your kingdom is playing, and don't try to go all in unless you're sure you can get a placement. If you're trying to get a commander through the Mightiest Governor and you just can't quite get top 15 plates, here are a couple ways to get them without doing that. First is placing from 16 to 25. Most kingdoms don't limit these placements, and if you can get up there and get in the top 25, you can still get 5 head, which means in 2 Mightiest Governor cycles for that commander, you can still unlock them. Alternatively, depending on the age of the commander, you may be able to find them in the Legendary Tavern. You can always check this by going to here and checking, because any commander that's available through the Legendary Tavern will also be available through the 200 opens reward, which is great, and I specifically recommend using these rewards on Mightiest Governor commanders, because the wheel commanders are much more accessible. Last, but certainly not least, some KvK events allow for unlocks like Mightiest Governor commanders, especially the specific commander taverns at the start of KvKs. So keep an eye out and watch for the commander you're looking for. This is the wheel in 60 seconds. The wheel is one of the best ways to unlock a commander with a guarantee. Although you don't get great value if you have terrible luck like me, you can at least get some guaranteed heads. The first chart you're going to see is actually the guarantees, and the value isn't as good as more than gems or some of the other events, but this doesn't account for any of the spins. Next, the chart on screen you're going to see now is the value you get based on the probability and the probability of you getting a head on each spin. So this is using expected value theorem, which I went over in the full-length video, which you'll see in the description if you want to check that out. But this is kind of what you can expect at each spin tier if you have average luck. When deciding how far to go in your wheel spins, just consider how many gems you have and how many you're comfortable spinning. Try to go to an even tier. So if you have enough to go to tier 3, go to tier 3, or go to tier 2. Don't go in between tier 3 and tier 4. Here's some quick tips for Shadow Legion. First, just check what special units the Shadow Legion is going to have. Each of them will have a strength against one troop type and a severe weakness to another. So just check out what that is and try to change your garrison if you can slightly to do so, because you can do a whole lot more damage and kill a lot more troops in the process. Second, make sure you equip your support skills if you're in KvK. A lot of people miss this and just have the auto equip, whereas you could just pick ones that do more damage or pick ones that better suit against that specific troop type. And you can clear levels faster and free up troops faster to help allies, which brings me to my last tip. Help your allies by reinforcing their cities. Do not attack the march, because if you attack the march, it kills troops before it gets to the city, and it denies your ally those points, those individual scores, and it also denies your alliance those points. So just reinforce the city, and even consider swapping in fresh troops like you would an active rally. Here are 3 things every governor should have in Rise of Kingdoms. First is a windswept set. The move speed on these sets is so good and it's so easy to expertise that there's no reason you shouldn't have it, whether you're a cav, infantry, or even if you just need to go get runes a little faster. It's so cheap to build this up that there's no reason you shouldn't have it. Second, you should always have a support march. And support marches don't necessarily have to be pure support, but they get a lot of bad rap because you don't see the support on the reports, but your allies will. And your other marches will. And if everybody on your team has one support march, it makes you all play just that much better. And last but certainly not least, you should have an alternate equipment set for your main troop type. Because you're going to have more than one of that troop type in the field at any one time. Even if it's not a perfect set, at least then you have a little bit of stats that you can eventually build up into a full set. So what kind of value do you actually get with these daily chests? So these daily chests give you a chance at legendary commander sculptures, but how consistently can you actually get them? Well, comparing them to what the probability is, we can do the same thing we did with the wheel, and using expected value theorem, we find a value of about 1.53 gold heads per chest. So if you bought all 3, you should get about 4 or 5, assuming you have average luck. So where does this fall on the scale of value? It's not as good as the Writer of History bundle, but that's hands down the best bundle you can get. But overall, it actually stands up pretty well to other bundles. But if you don't have good luck, you don't have as much good guarantees here. So I don't recommend it if you don't have good luck with things, as you're just better off taking the stuff that's guaranteed and not leaving it to chance, especially since you're spending your own money. If you're looking to get just a little bit more troops out of your training, here are a couple ways to do that. First, consider switching your civilization to Germany or Britain temporarily, just so you can get that extra training speed. It doesn't seem like much, but especially in between KvKs, if you have plenty of civilization changes, which you'll build up over time, this is a way to get just a little bit more troops out of it. Second, when you do get a good rune, or you switch civilizations, or you get a training buff for your kingdom, consider popping an expansion. The more buffs you have when you pop it, the better, because then that extra training speed is locked in once you start the training. So instead of it affecting just a 2,000 that you were training that day, it'll affect 20,000 or 10,000 or 50,000 or whatever your expansion's for. So this is by far the easiest way to get extra troops for doing what you were already going to do over that time anyway. This is a common question I get among players trying to understand how skills work, and it's basically, how do skills work versus one another? And really, it's broken down into two categories. You have active skills and passive skills. Active skills are your main skill that is used when your rage bar gets full. And simply put, once the rage bar gets full, you'll use the skill. And once you use it, you have to be still. So when you're running away from somebody or retreating, you can't use a skill. However, if you're chasing somebody down, there's an instant where you're stopped where you can use that skill. So that's why your active skill is not going. Whereas your passive skills can trigger regardless of if you're moving or not. So for example, Amani's third skill and Amani's fourth skill will trigger even if you're moving, because it's a passive skill. Whereas her main skill won't trigger until you stop moving. So this is something to consider if you're retreating and you're not using skills. You can stop for a split second, attack, and then keep running if you want, like you do with... Here's a weird Rise of Kingdoms tip. If you're trying to find a specific player, and you can't because you're looking at the map and, well, the whole map is littered with hundreds of cities as they are in KvK, here's a quick way to track them down without having to go city to city. First, go back to your city. When you go to your trading post, you can actually send resources this way, and when you do, you can select a player, just send one resource, and march. Once they're marching, you can go to your march and just hit the location marker, and it'll take you right to the person's city. This doesn't work if the person has selected the ability to not receive resources from allies, but otherwise it's a great way to quickly track down somebody if you need to give them a title for a war, or if you need to give them anything else. I got a really cool question from somebody the other day, and it was essentially, how many gold keys does it take to max a commander? Some people have multiple max, while some can't get any of them. And really, it's all based on luck. But we're going to crack open this statistic list and actually tackle it. So in golden keys chests, you can have a legendary commander at 0.8% chance. With 4 chances, that means it's about 3% chance per chest. And the same, 3.07 for 1 to 10 sculptures, or 12% chance to get one of those. So when you take an average of that and an average of opening the chest, you get around 0.75 gold heads per gold chest. However, that could be from anything from a cow to a martel to a Cid. So to get all of the max, it will take around 11,040. But to get 690 gold sculptures, if you're lucky enough to get them all for the same commander, it would take around 920 gold keys. So one of the questions I get a lot for players who are very new is, should they go to VIP 12 first, or should they max out the castle and watchtowers first? And honestly, there's a lot of math involved if you want a true objective answer. But the easiest answer I can give you is go for VIP 12 first. And here's why. If you have a level 25 castle, you have the rally capacity, but you don't have the commanders to really make an impact. And you have more troops, you might unlock T5 sooner, but then you're not going to have any commanders to use it. Conversely, if you unlock VIP 12 first, you're getting an extra commander sculpture every day, which doubles your intake from the 1 to the 2. So then you get more resources a day and get your commander's expertise quicker. In fact, you could even make the argument that you should go to VIP 14 first. So here's what maxing your buildings and maxing your tech will change in Rise of Kingdoms. First, when you max your buildings and your tech, you will also be affecting your KvK matchmaking rating, assuming you're in the top 300 of your kingdom. Any sort of power increase, troop level or otherwise, which includes buildings and research, will increase your matchmaking rating. And if your kingdom uses DKP, that means your expected DKP will grow up as well. This means that your expected contribution to your kingdom will also increase, which won't be an issue for most players, as the difference is only a few million power, which is around 100k deads or less. So if you consistently doubling your contribution, this is a negligible point, and it's really no real downside. Second, the sporadic events of increasing technical power and increasing building power will automatically be completed should you decide to max buildings and tech, giving you around 1,300 gems every single time it pops up. Over time, this can easily pay for the blueprint cost of the building upgrades, so it's something worth considering as well. And here's what maxing your buildings won't impact. First, your Arc of Osiris matchmaking rating will not be impacted. This is because Arc rating is based on troop count instead of actual tech level. This means that if you have maxed out everything and only 200,000 T5 troops, for example, at the end of a KvK, you'll have the same rating as somebody who has literally just completed their first T5 research and built up a full march of T5, even though your tech is fully maxed. This, of course, can cause problems with Arc, but that's just how the mode is programmed. However, the same cannot be said for Osiris League, which is based on total power over troop power. Lastly, as well, maxing out your tech and buildings will not impact any troop training events, and they will not automatically be completed like they would the building and tech events. Even if they include building or tech as part of it, you'll still have to do training to complete that. Hey everybody, a lot of people in my kingdom are talking about the reports that leaked for Joan versus a lot of the meta and how she's not beating XY Nevsky and Nevsky William. And I think that's kind of a good thing. And this is why. One, it's a 1v1 report with an AoE commander. If an AoE commander was out damaging a single target commander like Nevsky, I would be very concerned. On top of that, she has a lot of support buffs. So, rightfully so, she should be dialed back damage-wise to make her support more viable. Because you don't want to have a commander that's doing top damage and top support. That would be broken. So a perfect example is Theo. She doesn't win her garrison trades straight up a lot of times. But with this anti-swarm, she picks up with the AoE a lot of extra damage to make up for it. So similarly, even though Joan might not be winning those trades against XY Nevsky, she's going to be hitting everything around her and buffing all your allies. And those results will pay off. This is how too much of a stat can be a bad thing. So I'm going to have a longer format video, and I'll provide the link in the description once it's up. But I wanted to talk about it quickly in a shorts video as well, because the math is pretty straightforward. Basically, as you gain more of any stat, the overall incremental gain is less. Let's take, for example, two stats. One stat is 120% of the base value, and the other is 150%. You can choose to add 10% to one or the other. If you choose the 150%, you get even higher to 160%. But that's only a 6.7% increase versus the 150%. Meanwhile, adding 10% to the 120% gives 8.3% increase, which is a 24% larger impact versus the higher stat. This is part of why I'm so big on health, because you don't get a lot of health availability. So every health availability makes a bigger impact on your overall increase. But if you're ever unsure, you can always check out the Truth Buffs page on your reports to figure out what stat you need. Here are some simple tips to help improve your kingdom in little ways. First, volunteer gems for kingdom buffs. Kingdom buffs are insanely useful for everybody in the kingdom because it helps everyone, and it only costs about 1,500 to 2,000 gems usually. So doing so is a very inexpensive way, especially using your farms that aren't going to be using the gems, to help your kingdom everywhere. Second, always think about giving titles. Being a title giver, you get some good buffs, and you're able to help everybody else with architect, scientist, duke, whatever they need for upgrading. So in the time, you just get better and better and help everyone around you. Last, but certainly not least, clean up your resource nodes. Half-finished resource nodes will actually just sit there and take up space like a full one. So finishing them is key to make sure new ones spawn so that people can get more resources out of their time.